Oh, I was muted that whole time. Okay, well, that's good to know. Totally professional here. Let's see. Let's do some funny. I'm kind of happy. I think I might have work again. Last 3 weeks, no work. So, okay. Just checking everything out. How do I. Surely there's. Here we go. Google Effects. Oh. Can't I change. Can't I change the color? Must I only put horns on? Oh, hey, hi, Tlade.
Did you see me voting down? It said vote for your favourite moments. So I was thumb down, and I saw your expression change. I wondered whether you could see it.
No, I didn't see it.
No, it didn't make any noises or anything.
No, but I'm sad now.
With the clown on.
I didn't want headwear. What I wanted was, do I have the halo? No. I wanted to change. You can't. I guess you can't do. Like, I can't change myself into posterized or any color effects. That sucks. So how have you been?
So. Don't like those questions. I just spent half an hour or so with the Logic Zone people, and he asked the same question. It's like, I've been okay.
I see you haven't made a whole lot of videos this week. We haven't been kind of missing you on the YouTubes.
What did you want to talk about today, Pyro? It relates to the videos because I got some props I've been thinking about making some videos about, and I got this as well. Did you see that one? This is my golden ratio calipers. Yeah.
Cool.
And
so how does that work?
This the other day. Well, it's just mechanically. It works because it's got pivot points, which geometrically, is that a good angle?
Right.
They're geometrically connected, such that to ensure it stays at the golden
ratio between the two pairs, or the
endpoints.
So the distances between each of those two segments there is in the ratio. Oh, cool. Did you build that?
No, I bought them online. I bought a set of 3 that you could get, stainless steel. But yeah, I got this big insight into this video I wanted to make about that part of the problem with mathematics is the vocabulary, yeah? And for kids, it's like, oh, it's the ratio of this, that, the other, and it's like, and it's a fraction, it's a ratio, it's a fraction, it's a percentage, a ratio, fraction, and really all you're saying is that, like, this is to that as that is to this, and so I have the is to is part of the vocabulary that's missing too much, But, so I was thinking, I thought you made a comment about you wanted to talk about understanding. So the idea was, what is the understanding here that that this distance is to that distance as this distance is to that distance, and it's all these relationships are, to my mind, structural. In the neurons. I watched a good documentary. I was me and Harvest was talking about it a little. Have you seen it? The unconsciousness. It's the, what's it called? World Festival of Science, or World Science Festival. It's a good talk.
Yeah, I just watched the very beginning of it. It had Alan Alda from the old MASH TV show. Um,
I like him.
and
He's normally very good, but
it had some neuro psychologist, and it had a guy that was a screenwriter that writes about consciousness. He wrote like Being John Malkovich movie. I don't know if you guys have seen that, and
Oh, that's
adaptation. And a
awesome.
lot of yeah. So he's talking about consciousness. It was just posted yesterday, and I saw it this morning. I didn't have time to get very far past the introductions, but I was like, oh, I got to mark this for later.
what was it? He did the Eternal Sunshine. What was that one with something Eternal Sunshine of
The
something or
Spotless
other?
Mind.
Spotless
Oh, that
Mind.
one I
Yeah.
haven't seen yet.
Talking about memory, you know, and are we live now? Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Hello, Andrew.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Andrew the Red, a Manchester United fan or a Liverpool fan or some other fan?
It is based off Eric the Red. I just had that nickname a long time.
And who's Eric the Red?
He's a Scottish, oh no, Viking. He was a Viking.
So yeah, ostensibly I did have some subjects, but I mean I also want there to be some continuity. I think I want to continue. In a way, I think this issue of consciousness and will, you know, that we've already raised, they should always be a part of the discussion. I think that's sort of the real situation for people that like thinking about philosophy. It's not whether you're going to, you know, become an academic philosopher. You can think about science. Doesn't mean you're going to become a scientist. What's really going on? Well, I mean, we're willing creatures, and we have to handle that, you know. So I think it's always a subject. The subject I was going to talk about today, though, is that I don't know if you guys will be interested, but I want to talk about a philosophy of art with as it relates to information theory. And see, to me, again, this relates to this consciousness thing, because we're really talking about what is meaning. And I feel we're at a point in history where we found out the world really does have information in it, and so information has some sort of relationship to meaning, right? So
Well,
this sort of nothing has meaning, we've lost semantics, is, you know, maybe repairable.
what did I say? Understanding. Are we using meaning and understanding here synonymously? You think?
Well, probably not. No, not. Let's not assume so.
Well, I don't know what you mean by meaning.
Well, you know,
that.
okay, so for example, just setting this big picture, we have this postmodern realization of, well, maybe everything's meaningless. Not to bring up Gary, but no, you know, that everything is in some sense meaningless, right? So, but what is information? Information relates to meaning, and we do believe in physics and that there's real information out there. It's not all just whatever. No, you know.
Just 1 second. When you say meaning in physics, I don't think there's meaning in physics as different from understanding in physics. In the endeavor, see, physics is an endeavor, yeah. And so, in what sense you say it has meaning? It meets its purposes. I'm not sure. To me, they're equivalent. I'm looking for the distinction here.
The distinction between understanding and meaning.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I mean, the problem is we have information. We don't really understand the universe, and yet we understand it more than we did before. So how do you define understanding, I think, is the problem. I think information tries to capture that by kind of ignoring the understanding and just saying, well, you know, there's some evidence out there in the world. If you did know how to read the evidence, you'd be able to see that the broken twig is information about, you know, that the deer passed this way. So information is kind of an angle into meaning where you get to ignore some of these actual issues of whether you really understand it. And this book that I was working on and am working on, but that I named this Hangout after, with The Illusion Exists, I'm going in this direction of, no, information is not about understanding. All information is sort of illusion. Like, you have an illusion that you experience and you describe something about it in contrast to how it appears, and that's information. You know, so the sun rises and you go, no, actually the earth is spinning. That the earth is spinning is information in contrast to my experience that it's the sun that's moving. Right? So that it's not understanding so much as information actually is related to an illusion where you misunderstand something, you misinterpret something. So it's almost like information relates to a misunderstanding, which for me is fine as a skeptic, because it just means, yeah, anything I understand at a given moment is on some other level going to be a misunderstanding in the future. You know what I mean? It's always elusive.
I hear you, but I'm not able to pull it together as a concept as to what you're saying that I can address that. You know, there are these confusing aspects to it, and you think you understand something only to later find out you'd never, or you more fully understand it, or you attain another point of view which gives you a deeper or alternate understanding or picture of it. I think that's my own way of echoing what you just said. But
yeah.
In terms of when we did computer studies at high school, you know, there was a definite distinction between data and information. And data was, look, the zeros and ones, and information was classed as meaning imprinted on that data. Now, in that sense, that's just the same as saying understanding what those ones and zeros means is synonymous to me. Now, the physicists, and indeed I heard relatively recently Susskind say, I don't know what you mean. If I use information and data interchangeably and such forth, so you have to say something concrete, I guess, for me to offer anything, because
well, fair enough, but that's the thing we're exploring.
I'm fixated on the equivalence in my mind.
So I think the issue here, though, is that, I mean, this is to me that we're trying to explore where can we get that meaty substance where it's possible to actually, you know, assess it or judge it or whatever, or have that kind of reaction where you can get a hold of it. And I think that the point of or my ideal of why talking about the philosophy of art addresses this is it's just one place to go look, because in art we have meaning that's sort of a playground, right? So if you're trying to figure out what the change in your local environment means, you know, and you're a primitive animal and there's a forest fire, it's like things seem to be a little different, you know. Then understanding that, well, that's a real world issue, and how you use the information for your survival, it puts all this complication. So if we talk about art, then there's sort of a playground for things that are ostensibly meaningful, right, to us. Well, and there's information.
I mean, start with this. Lay it out in a simple example for me. I don't know, maybe with a line or a stick man or something. You know, I draw a stick man.
Well, but what do you think I'm trying to lay out there, I guess, is what I've lost track of. So what does it seem like I'm presenting?
I know I have a lot to say about meaning and understanding as synonymous, but if you're talking about something else, and see meaning in you what.
But meaning and understanding. I mean, but see, I'm a relativist. If you understand.
If I have a look in the computer memory and I see some zeros and ones in particular configurations, I can recognize them as ASCII codes, yeah, and I can say, I see meaning in that code, or I can say synonymously, I understand what that is. That's an A, the character representing the character A. So in that sense, meaning and understanding are synonymous.
But what if that memory was really the graphical memory, and those it's not an A, it's actually
Right. Well, that's
byte.
a different. Well, that's a different question. The point
No,
is,
it's very related because you have one bit of
no,
memory
I
can look
didn't
at
say
the
it
meaning.
wasn't related. I didn't say it
Let me,
wasn't related.
right,
But I
okay,
think
good.
it's a
So you didn't
different
say it wasn't,
question.
yeah.
So,
But here's my thing as a relativist with the meaning issue is that it's this is always true, but no more, never more so than in computer memory, that memory can mean anything. It could be the letter A. It could be how much love the Sims character is being simulated to feel for another. It could be part of a pixel. It could be anything.
okay, so you say that to me, and I say, yeah, that there is a chance that doesn't actually mean, but in isolation, I can say it means this, or I understand it to be that. Yeah.
Right.
If later, then I follow through the whole memory structure, and I realize that there's a whole block of memory assigned to a camera, and that it's,
Right.
a particular pixel, I can then say, while it means that to me in isolation, look, taking this bigger picture,
Yeah.
I understand, or it now has the meaning for me that that's a particular, the RGB, that's just
Right.
specification of how much green to put in a particular pixel.
Right.
So look, I'm not denying this wider access, and it is context related, but there may be then somebody outside of us say, he thinks it means that. I understand. This is the matrix I'm programming, and that's what he thinks he's going to mean. You know what I mean? There's that element to it, but
I think the difference is that in some ways, like with understanding, it's about intent, and your intent with understanding is to see what the truth is, where with meaning is more imposed of like a simulation. And these guys are intertwined. I'm not saying that they're completely dissimilar, right? But if if I simulate a man by drawing a stick figure, right, then I've got a simulation of a man. I'm trying to make an understanding of what a man is. But then I can take that stick figure and add to it, right? I can make the man fly and have lasers come out his eyes, right? Until we get the Superman, and then Superman is no longer a simulation of a real thing. It's a simulation of a simulation. And so then we can impose whatever meaning on it we want to, any kind of, but not. I don't know if it would really relate to understanding.
No, I hear you. I hear you.
Right.
There is a subtle distinction there in common dialogue. When you say, right, what is the meaning of life? There is this kind of, what you're saying is that there's some imposition of an ultimate goal and meaning, and understanding. So I would accept that as a particular distinction. Now, is that the aspect that Pyro's trying to get at? I'm not so sure. Whether, because I flat say there is no imposition of meaning of life. In art, I would say,
Well, meaning of life, you're jumping ahead really far. Let's just say, is there really a meaning of that byte being the letter A? That's kind of something we can focus in on, because I guess where the angle I'm coming from is, okay, I'm the skeptic, anti-establishmentarianism, the way I'm raised and whatnot. So I'm coming from, look, it looks to me like you can project whichever meaning you want, and especially on computer memory. I mean, it can be meant to be a picture, and I can look at it as a string and print it as a document. I have total power over that. Makes it look arbitrary. But where we are now with physics is like, no, information really does relate to information. So what we've called meaning as humans, maybe that's the problem of how we've defined it, because there does seem to be like a set of information. Like when you take a photograph and you have it in the digital form, it really does mean does have a photographic meaning, and in quantum mechanics, because you can trace the physics by which that information got there back to the information that was imprinted by a bunch of light reflecting off an object. So where my bias is very relativistic and we're putting the meaning in there. Physics is giving us no, information's real, and the meaning of that bit of data, it isn't the letter A, it is a green dot, because there is an actual physical, often we forget this physical link. It has a physical link to what it was a picture of, and that is suddenly this unification between the psychological meaning and the fact that, well, there is real meaning, and things can have, I'll just finish real quick with, if you look at it that way, things can have more than one meaning, right? Because there's more than one physical, thing coming together to make this event. But they can't have infinite. It's not whatever you want. It's based, the meaning is based on, well, what's it really interacted with? And then final sentence is, if you bring that down to art, okay, if I take a photo, it's physically related to what I took a photo of. What if I'm an artist and I paint something I saw? That's also physically related. So suddenly you have real meaning in art, as opposed to this sort of arbitrary whatever you want it to mean kind of feel that we have in the 21st century.
Right. So there are some situations in which the meaning is fungible, but in computing, it usually is resolvable, that there is an ultimate meaning. Yeah. I mean,
if you track the key presses and then that guy hit an A and then the A went in the memory, you can track that if you really wanted to in the computer. Yeah. And in that sense, there is a physical meaning to everything that is less arbitrary rather than more.
But the point is we don't get the choice. In asking what the meaning is of a particular word in memory is, we don't really have a choice over that, because ultimately meaning also connected with this imposition idea that Inventive gave us, and is insightful, I think, in seeing that, is purpose. Yeah. Mm-hmm. What we're talking about is I thought I recognize that as the symbol A in ASCII code, but in fact there has been another agency who had the purpose of modeling this pixelate camera image, blah blah blah, projecting it on a screen, and it was part of this wider schema and purpose of the programmer. My mum has a great piece of abstract art, and it's like all these wavy bands and like a sun, and it's like just crazy, and everybody sees what they want. To me, it's a sun and a beach and some kind of river, but there's just crazy shit in there, and other people see other things, and and so in that sense, I understand how art can screw with meaning, if you like.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's why it's useful, and I think it's more than just like a poetical endeavor now. I think with this information theory, all of this stuff is getting unified. I think we are experiencing a unification of all of man's knowledge through the fact that information theory really applies to everything. More than physics, more than old Newtonian physics ever did, where we thought, hey, this applies to everything. Information theory literally applies to absolutely everything we experience, know about, do, want to do, plan, don't want to plan, our emotional reaction. So it's the unified theory of everything. Information theory is what is emerging.
The way meaning is has different connotations in different contexts, with which that we recognize. There's in the sense that we were talking about, this imposition of purpose and what you get as a meaning out of the abstract art. There is no answer. Yeah, physically the information is there, and you, as you said, you get to project your own meaning on it. But in those situations, ultimately there is no answer. It is just how your neurons relate and your neural connectivity relate to the neural
Well, see,
stimuli.
that's what I
But
used to
see,
believe, but no. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
okay, like just because it's physical doesn't mean it's not imaginary, right? So like the Superman figure, it exists. The thing that it's simulating, Superman, doesn't exist, but the
Hmm.
figure does exist, right? So once we have this idea of meaning in art, we can impose that on the world in a lot of different ways, right? To where
Hmm.
when I walk around the city I live in, everything was placed there by somebody. The roads are placed there. The trees are planted in specific positions. The flowers were planted in specific positions. The buildings are in specific positions for a specific purpose. Like we go to Disneyland to try
I've had that revelation. That's an
and
amazing
and
thought.
and escape reality when we go to Disneyland. But Disneyland itself is real, right?
I
So
see
I
your
live in
point.
this house, and it's a physical house, but also it's an idea of a house. Like it could have been round walls instead, but we've got this idea where houses have flat walls, and so it's really just an idea of a
Disneyland's a
house.
perfect example of what is the meaning of Disneyland when you go, or let's say, what is the meaning of your experience you have when you go to Disneyland? I mean, because it's such an entertainment thing, and a lot of people don't really enjoy it. I mean, it can be quite miserable, actually taking a bunch of kids there or whatever. So, what is the actual meaning, or is it meaningless, or is it even possible for it to be meaningless? But what I'm saying is, in contrast to what you were saying, Heithlade, uh, I think we do get an out now. We can say that something has a particular meaning. When you hold up that Superman figure, its real meaning, uh, from a physical point of view, is all of the forces and historical path that caused it to be created. So, for example, if
No,
it was
no, no,
created
no.
in Siam in a factory by slave children, part of the
No,
meaning
no.
really
That's not.
inherent is that, even if you
No, you're
didn't know
talking
it.
about something else now. The meaning. We were talking about meaning in the context of seeing like an imposition of purpose behind it. Um,
Possibly.
but that isn't the meaning of the Superman. That's what you understand about the processes that led to its aggregation.
Well, including
That,
the creation of
I wouldn't say
Superman
that.
by the
I wouldn't say
artist
the
as an
meaning of
idea.
the meaning of the model Superman is child labor in India.
It
You
could
know,
be.
I don't know what you mean. It could be.
It's
Well, I mean,
possible.
when I buy a
It could
toy,
be.
when
It
I
could
buy a
be.
toy, I mean, if I bought a toy and I knew that it was created, that would be part of the meaning of that toy. Where,
No,
I'd play with that
not
toy and
as
I
it.
would know it was created by slave children. It
Yeah,
would be
but that's
meaningful to me if
understanding.
I knew
That's
that.
not the meaning of the toy.
Well, it is if you have a sufficient knowledge.
It's
No,
not the
not
intended
because
meaning of
the
the toy,
meaning,
but just that
as
protect.
we discussed, the meaning relates to the purpose,
What
the
if you watched a
underlying
movie? What if you?
imposed purpose. Yeah,
Can
and
I interject?
the purpose of the little Superman toy is not related to how it was produced.
Why
Yeah,
not?
because that's not what its
Well,
purpose is.
let me put it this way. Let's say we have a movie. Let's stick it with the art thing because it is a good playground for this. Let's say you have a movie. There's a rape in the movie. Lots of movies have rapes. It could be various meaning to why. Then you watch the movie. Somebody else watches the movie, but with the knowledge that the director and author of the screenplay are serial rapists. I think that would affect the meaning of what that rape meant in the movie, right? This extra knowledge would change the meaning. And if you want to say what's the real meaning in the movie, it would have to be with relationship to some hypothetical full knowledge. So that's why I'm saying that where the
But
toy was
but
made, once you
that's
know where those toys are made, it might become a
That's
factor in the
true.
meaning.
That's true. But what you're talking about is an interrelation that's going on between one or more people, two or more people in this rape business, and it's about the relationship that's happening, and that there are many different modes of that relation existing, right? And many different modes of how people relate to that relationship. But about a physical object such as Superman, you know, its purpose is a toy, and you know, it doesn't get the meaning of child labor. I don't see that.
Okay, let me jump in as a moderator.
It's a,
let's see if you know, Andrew or Miguel, they've been sitting here patiently and quiet. Let's see if they have something to add.
Yeah, I'll just say it sounds like what you're saying about meaning is that you're making connections between the knowledge that you have about whatever the art piece or the movie is. The more knowledge you have, maybe the more meanings you can generate. The lower knowledge you have, the less you can. In terms of what is the ultimate meaning of something, or the Superman and what it should mean and shouldn't mean, I'm not sure that really applies. It seems like it's more a rhetorical question. I think the question should be, what do you expect for an answer out of a question like, what is the meaning of something?
Yeah, I think that's all very astute.
Can I just say, in regard to the rape business, and I think that what Andrew just said bears on what I have to say here, because within the rape question and this new understanding, that there are two questions. There is, what does the rape mean in the context of the story, and what is the meaning? So there's the meaning to the story, and then there's the additional meaning that when I find out that it was made by a writer who was a serial rapist, I find out then it has the meaning of maybe fantasy and gratification for him. But those are two separate meanings as relations to what we're talking about. You can't conflate the two and say, oh, it can be anything.
Well, but I kind of want it on the physical side, though.
But it depends on how it relates to what we're talking about.
Yeah, but okay, granted, I find that's both very true. I'm just saying that I'm proposing that we now, with the way physics is going, physics can make a statement on this, right? And so there is this idea of what would the real meaning be. It would be like an infinite sum, kind of like a Feynman diagram is an infinite number of paths, you know, so you could never quite calculate it, but you still could define this idea of, if you did have complete information about its genesis and everything, including all the comic books of Superman and their popularity and the kids and adults that have read them and how that all worked out so that figurine came along. So, you know, it wouldn't be dominated by where that toy happened to be made. That would just be one detail like everything. But then you'd have that ultimate meaning, you know, as a conceptual entity or theoretical entity. And then when you just get one meaning, when looking at the Superman figurine means your childhood, your experiences with Superman or whatever, that's you taking a cross section. That's you taking a lower, you know, an n-1 dimensional cross section. And that's, you choose to do that, but it's the real meaning is still the whole thing.
It's as Andrew said, if you want me to ask what you mean, but what the meaning is, it's what context do you want the answer in? And I will give it, and there will be only one meaning. For example, if you say, what Andrew's saying is, or I think this is my correct, I hope this is what he meant, and it's the insight I gained from him, is that if you don't specify the context of about the question, then you say, what does it mean to me? I say, well, it just means it doesn't have any purpose, meaning like deep, other than the toy. But if you say, what does it mean for the production that we produce this so cheaply? So you've got to give the terms of the argument, and then I go, oh, well, it means really that capitalism doesn't.
But why can't I say the meaning over all possible contexts? Why can't I just say, hey, the physical meaning will be the integral over all possible contexts,
Well,
And the meaning that I, as an individual, I'm not over all possible
except for
content.
that end bit. I don't know what that means.
Well, let me switch a little bit. Here's another meaning question, a little thought puzzle. So, I think die, D-I-E, is a German word, right? It's the feminine the, right? Okay,
Yeah.
it also means die in English.
Ah.
Okay, so those are obviously, especially again, if we get to use computers, which is a wonderful thing for these arguments, considering philosophers had to deal with information arguments with no computers. Computers give a great metaphor and reality to it. So obviously we can have die on my computer and it's die. I could have typed it. I could have meant either one of those things. So what does that do to inherent meaning? This is my bias. This is where I'm coming from, that there is no inherent meaning in DIE because obviously die and the are feminine, the are totally, they don't share a meaning, right?
Yeah. Well, as Andrew
But they
said,
do.
So,
But my point then is actually I don't believe that anymore because
yeah,
the meaning of die is both of those together.
No, but that's just the recognition of that the question you posed and the bounds within which you allow for an answer is dependent on the relational objects involved. And if you tell me as an Englishman relating to that word, what does it mean? I say it's die. If you change the context and say and in these situations, you could argue, without knowing the purpose of the person who wrote it, then it doesn't have any particular meaning.
Right.
But it doesn't actually have them all. And when you understand the purpose of the English writer talking about games in, a gambling establishment, you understand. No, it's no debatability whether it's German or not. He means the dice,
Yeah, but I don't see why he should be the authority. Miguel, did you have your hand up?
Yeah.
The purpose. We'll come back to that.
Hi. See, I've been listening to you guys. Sorry for my broken English, and sometimes my thought process will not go into a line that I would want it to. Because I suffer with ADHD, so do bear with me, please.
Sure, no problem.
If ADHD even exists, I just had so many people sending me messages on Facebook. It doesn't actually exist. It's just
Yeah.
it's an invention to some drugs. Well, can we from what has been said here, can we eventually talk of a unified field of experience in terms of, is there unified? I think you were trying to go towards that direction there. Is there such a thing as one meaning? Something as a meaning, it has to have that particular meaning, excluding all the other subjective approaches to that particular meaning. What I'm trying to say is it possible, or is it impossible, because of all of our subjective experiences about a certain aspect of reality and our own baggages in terms of historical baggage, in terms of all of that, is it possible to ever come to a unified field of experience, of not unified field of experience in terms of physics, but in terms of the meaning of a certain event? Can it ever be unified as meaning the same to everyone that actually comes in contact with that event? Would it ever be possible? Are you suggesting, Peter, that from computational and from quantum physics discoveries, that there is such a thing as an objective meaning, that something has that meaning and no other meaning? Is that what you're saying, or am I completely misunderstanding it?
Yeah. No. But given that I'm a relativist, and so I'm of us having, and we can't really collate and correlate this, and the meaning is definitely personal, and I'm a deconstructionist when I watch my art, and I get my own meaning, and I'm not obligated to see what other meaning was supposed to be put there. But yes, I think in physics we have a way to theoretically, I'm not going to experience this meaning, but it's just like these Feynman diagrams, where in Feynman, if you're calculating or a Feynman path calculation for a photon, you actually say, well, what if the photon went around the left and came back? What if it went around the right and came back? And you sum those together, these contradictory paths, you sum them together, and this is the whole understanding of the path and how you calculate where the light is actually going to end up. And I'm saying that in principle, meaning suddenly has this same thing. It's like it's the full genesis. Die in English and in German, there's a reason that they say share those same letters, right? There's sounds like die in Asian language. They don't share the same letters. You wouldn't type them in the same into a computer. There's a reason. There's relationships that make these D and I and E reused in these two languages. And so be it coincidence or whatever, it's a long genealogy. So the fact that both of those three-letter words have two different meanings but with the same set of letters, they really are, to me, united in a common set of meaning, which is just sort of inherently complex. In other words, the part you said about meaning, like one meaning being the true one and driving out the others. No, I'm thinking more like infinite sets of contradictory meanings, all with their own claim to legitimacy. And the ones with no claim to legitimacy, they aren't in the mix, right? But an infinite number of meanings that have claim to legitimacy, somehow the real physical meaning is all of those things, and it does come down to time and sort of the genealogy of how did that thing come together. How did that, maybe even...
Sorry, I interjected that and without full... please do continue, Sorry.
No, please interject. I was starting my rambling phase where I was just going to repeat myself.
You said a lot.
Sorry?
With High Flow Day and Pyro, you really just sometimes either got to like raise your hand and let people know that you want to speak, or just jump in there, because those guys will start, disagreeing with each other at no end.
Yeah, feel free to interject. I mean, I'll say if we get to it, I think
you can end up dominating. Inventive, you do a good job.
I can add something. It sounds like what Piero is saying is that given these different languages using the same words, if you put them in digitalized form or computer language, they are the same, and he's saying that that is some centralized root, and those roots manifest in different meanings. Is that what you're saying?
Right, I'm saying it's like if you had split universes and then they merge again or whatever, it's like, well, hey, somehow DIE merged and there's two meanings and they seem contradictory, but really no, they're not contradictory, they coexist, and the meaning of those three letters is both of those things, whether you know German or not.
Well, you said about the genealogy that that they would ultimately come from a root sameness, and that can be something that can be analysed and found out as a a truth or not. So and as regards quantum mechanics, this.
But wait, I'm not claiming that. No. Could I pause? Could I interject? Because look, I'm not saying the they don't have the common root. It's the D, I, and E. The reason they're using the same alphabet is what the commonality is. Right? There was a guttural spoken words that have very little relationship.
But that's not the meaning. That's the meaning of the letters. Then
it's part of the meaning.
You're subverting. The meaning.
We're talking about the whole meaning, though, Hypolytic.
No. This is where you're saying about. Okay, right. Let's just go back.
Okay, go ahead. I'll give you some time to get some momentum.
Because when you say the whole meaning, when you relate it to the quantum mechanics and the physics, because you seem to think this gives substantiates your claim a little bit. When you talk about the electron being summed over all paths, part of the problem of that is that it's teleological. Yeah, it's as you're suggesting that the electron is saying, which way I go? Maybe I go all the way around that way. Which way do I want to go? What if I wanted to go all the ways? And that's what the part of it which makes it absurd, in my opinion.
I think it just goes all the ways, though.
Interpretation, yeah.
It doesn't decide. I'm saying it goes all the ways.
To me, it's grounds for rejecting that interpretation. There are other interpretations which don't have to sum over all paths, because
Well, no, for photons. Wait a second. What do you mean? Let's go with photons, because I don't know about the electrons. We've tested a lot in photons. They've done all kinds of weird shaped mirrors and stuff. And Feynman, I know you've seen some of the things where he goes into them. So, you know, you can, for example, you can have a mirror that isn't solid, right, with empty slits in it, and you can shine light at it and it won't bounce off at an incident angle. It'll bounce off at a weird angle because of the quantum aspect of how the paths cancel out, right? So what other, I mean, there is no other interpretation. It's weird to understand it, but the most accurate way to figure out where the light will go is...
Quantum mechanics is just a calculating tool, yeah? And they all give the same answer. All these interpretations...
Why would I have to calculate all the paths?
Well, you don't.
Why does that work?
That's a different question. That's
no, but why does it work if it's not really happening? Usually, if you have to calculate something in a certain way, that's evidence that it works that way.
You're not hearing me.
I'm probably not listening. Okay, I'll give you some time. You have the floor.
Other people can do...
It's taking me a while to collect my thoughts. No, don't start yet. Okay.
Other people can make exactly the same calculation without doing the sum over histories. Yeah?
Who?
And the imprinting. All the other, just basic vector...
No, but basic... No, come on. Maybe, no, okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
Yeah.
No, there's weird edge cases where that does not work.
What does it mean that there be an interpretation? Feynman tells us that when you have some physical theories and they all predict the same consequences, he says you can't tell the difference, no way, no how. And that's all there is to it. And that's
right, but I disagree that they...
That's what it means to have a different interpretation.
I disagree that there are other methods that calculate right off of a flat, solid mirror, fine, but when you start putting weird shaped gaps in the mirrors that are related to the wavelength of the light, you can have light flying off at weird angles that make no sense with that angle of incidence stuff.
You're wrong, because the quantum postulates are quantum postulates, yeah, and it says the state of spaces is a vector space, and purely dealing with the mathematics as a vector space, you can output the calculation, because the thing is with a vector space is it's not like normal regular properties like this is hard. A vector space allows something unreal to happen if it is indeed real. Yeah, the unreal thing happens that there can be a positive mobile phone and a negative mobile phone, and I put them together and I have no mobile phones. In physical reality, we never see anything of that.
Well, maybe it's just my lack of knowledge.
The postulates say that the state of spaces is a vector space, right? And it's that mathematical modeling that will yield any answer you care to give. That's just a different interpretation.
But I don't know why you're saying. Maybe it's just the lack of knowledge, Hythalidae, on my part, because I do not know of any other math. You know, you can do the many paths thing, and there will be a component from every path. They could cancel out, but you know those components will show up. I don't know of another way of calculating that takes those components into account. You know.
Remember when I said I'd like to interview some physicists, and one of the first questions I would say is, what does it mean that there be interpretations of quantum mechanics? Yeah, and I expect that they give the Feynman answer, that there are all these people who can all make the same calculation, proposing different mechanics, and they all arrive at the same answer, and there's no way to differentiate them.
I don't think that's quite the case though with the many paths thing.
That's great that we get to such a point where we have a clear understanding of our differences.
Yeah, and it is good too, because I think I can find some example, because there's some really weird setups with LED blocks and mirrors of weird shapes that do some really strange stuff to the light that I don't think you can explain with the regular single path geometry, even with your complex vector spaces, which I do get. You're right, with a complex vector space you sort of have the freedom to say, well, you get to use that field thing to
the more variables of unknowns you put in, that just creates more suppositions, and suppositions just a fancy word for the vector. Yeah, that it is a vector with this kind of
Yeah, Yeah, but the difference that that I'll look into, and we don't have to belabor it here, is just this infinite number of terms kind of thing. It's like, I wonder who else has that kind of component. But so
I think
it's
that with gravity waves, they have to go over the whole visible universe, because everything in the universe is exerting gravity on everything else in the universe, right? So
yeah.
with gravity waves, you pretty much already force into a position where the waves have to, I don't know what the right word is, go all over the whole universe. I don't know. I've been looking at this new one called rainbow gravity that
Huh.
shows that there's no Big Bang.
Well, I
And
love rainbows, so that sounds great.
I know, right? Yeah. But like
Hey,
the the universe contracts, and when it gets to a certain point, it can't get any more smaller, and it's still a lot bigger than like a single point. But it gets to a point where it can't get any smaller. There's some kind of constraint, and then it starts getting bigger again, and then at some point it can't get any bigger, so it starts getting smaller again, and so it kind of the universe itself waves over time.
that makes sense to me. I'll have to look that up.
You have to be careful with mathematics. Einstein came up with the general relativity equations that, based upon considering geometry and geodesics of least travel and the equivalence principle and so on and so forth. But somebody else has apparently derived the Einstein equations by just thinking about entropy, and like this is me talking now, because
Hmm.
I assume I take from that. The fact is, somebody invoking entropy has generated the Einstein equations. So I read from that there's a statistical nature to entropy and progression, and what Feynman would say is, so we have two mechanical understandings, if you like, one geometrical and one sort of statistical, maybe entropic way, arriving at the same equation. And Feynman would say you can't get married to any mechanism in that circumstance, because you can never, unless if they both make exactly
Right.
the same predictions.
Functional equivalence.
So that's my
Yeah.
understanding of what it means to have,
Yeah.
some people
I
think
agree with that. I want to endorse that 1,000%. I believe that it's it's a principle of functional equivalence in philosophy as well, and I do believe that. I agree. We cannot make a distinction between two ways to arrive. So, for example, with the Feynman thing, it's a matter of, is there really another way that's equivalent that someone's proposed or not? Gary's trying to say his system will come up to the same mathematics. Well, it wouldn't. I think he's already said enough things to show that it wouldn't come to the same math. But if it did, then you have a functional equivalence, and he would really have no reason to argue for his system over another. So,
to answer your question about name another interpretation that can do the calculation,
yes.
Multiverse. Yeah, the multiverse answer is that they all actually happened. If you say, oh, that's crazy.
Oh, okay, yeah, all right.
So that's an explanation.
Yeah, no, if you're counting that as a different thing, I see, and yeah, that could be a different thing. So, hey, I've got to go to the restroom. I'm going to get some coffee, so I want a 5-minute personal break. Hopefully everybody's in. Keep talking if you want, and when we come back, I was going to talk about some politics stuff was the second thing, but if we have a group of people here, if people want to talk about physics or anything else, I'll be open to that. Other than that, the subject was going to be geopolitics and what kind of really, what divides us or not.
Yeah,
but we don't have to talk about that.
I mean,
Right.
we went sufficiently off the reservation there that we can park that.
I love it. I consider that exactly how I'd like these to go. Yeah, no, because it's kind of a launching pad, and I want to wander through this whole terrain, I think we're all smart enough to be talking about what's this whole terrain of this philosophy and how does all of this stuff relate together. So that's why I like these topics that bring in will and information and meaning, because I think that's really where, as humans being, that's where we really live, on what things mean to us, and even if it's scientific. So I like that, yeah. But it was a little bit like a rocket where we start off on a launch pad and it's like. So got into physics, but that's the idea. So okay, I'll be back in say 5 minutes or so. Feel free to continue. All this is still recording and everything, broadcasting. So cheers.
Not the deal.
So see you about 5:15 or so.
Yeah. It's called the Terrier principle, where you and I agree with it. You have to sink your teeth in and go wherever the debate leads you. And try and thrash out, a bottom.
I don't think we're ever get to a bottom of this. We'll be talking these hangouts until we're all old men.
Older men.
Older men, yeah.
It's so real. It's so real because not only is just the question of meaning that we were discussing incredibly contextual. Not only is it contextual if it's framed in a certain point in time. It is contextual in that sense. It is also contextual in the sense of what we bring back in terms of our own experiences. So it will be very hard to define. Well, it is obviously it's obvious that it's hard to define the word meaning, but and in the context in relation to what Piero is suggesting that we go next to is in terms of geopolitics, politics, is the question of meaning is highly relevant. So, what is the meaning? What is the meaning of territory for me? What is the meaning of territory for another nation? What is the meaning of possession or property in terms of owning something? It's the question of meaning is incredibly hard and contextual.
I think Andrew said it best when, and Pyro's confusing the fact of the matter that there be many meanings with the question, somebody trying to answer the question, what is the meaning? Because as Andrew said, okay, once you pose that question, then the other person should either can reply and say, well, what do you mean? You're in the meaning as I relate to it, or how it wider relates in world economics, or blah blah blah, is the correct response to that. But more usually, you think you understand the context, the mean of that meaning question, so you just answer. But when Pyro's considering this great body of different meanings in different contexts, I think he's struggling to pull together a coherent statement about that fact, other than that there are many meanings in different contexts. I mean, I don't know. Yeah. I think he wants to see more meaning in it than there is.
It seems to me that when you ask a question of meaning, that you assume boundaries that creates that meaning. But what Piero, I think, was trying to say is that he wants to combine them all, and I'm not saying it's impossible, but what would that mean to combine meanings that are each built in a context?
That's right. Yeah, it's meaningless. But I think he's got an insight from quantum mechanics that might just be flat wrong, because he sees this summing all the meanings. Like if you think of a photon or electron as having this contemplative decision to, go all the journeys. What if I go all of them? And I think I don't know.
I think also and this is something I got from maybe about 15 minutes ago. There was this question of whether meaning is something that we find in, like I think one of you said that we were talking about data, and you said that you saw meaning in the data. Is meaning in there that we discover, or is it something that we create? And both.
That's exactly how you put it. Is it depends. If you ask me what meaning do I see in that bit of data, then you're asking me how I relate to it and as an understanding. Whether it has any wider meaning, it could be a completely dead computer, if you like, powered up but no operating system, and somebody could physically take pins and program the memory, yeah, such that you make the read pin, the write pin high, and then you set the input addresses to a particular location, and then you type the you can set the memory location so they could all be zeros, yet this one memory location has this configuration. You ask me, what does it mean to me? I said, well, it doesn't have any ultimate meaning. Some Joe Blogs, for the fun of it, did this, electronically program the chip, but I can say, to me, it looks like an ASCII code. Does that relate to what you said?
I think it relates to communication, right? The person that has got the little pins is trying to send you a message, and then the amount of that message that you understand, or they're trying to say something. It may not be to you, but they've got some intent on how they set the little knobs in the computer, and then yeah, and he might not be. He might just be doing it randomly, right?
I think what the confusion might be versus some of our opinions and Piro's perspective is there not something that we can definitely say that we share in our experience in the world? You could call it objectivity if you like. Is there not something that we share when we look at the world? And is there not something that we don't share? And how do we separate those things?
So in terms as a forward step into what Piro was trying to bring with the following conversation will be, if there's a common understanding of a certain, if we ever achieve that common understanding, will that help us to evolve as a more united civilization, human civilization? Do we need that for our survival? Do we need to invest more and more and more in this, looking for these points of contact of common understanding that obviously I don't know, I got lost there. If we are ever to go and not just really, I'm not just talking about religion or what.
To the extent that we share meaning, relating to Andrew, I think to the extent that we share meaning is dependent on the extent we agree to define meaning. Is that not right?
Well, we could all find the same meaning in something and still all be wrong, just because there's
yeah.
Just because there's an agreed meaning, that it doesn't mean that we're not all confused by something. Like, we used to all think that the sun comes up, right? And now we all think that the sun is
what I said is, to the extent that we share meaning, we have to agree on certain things. The rightness and wrongness is a separate question. I mean, you can assume that we're right, yeah, or you can assume that we're wrong. But in either case, as Andrew said about sharing meaning and understanding about existence of things, that it's dependent on agreements between us, surely.
I think agreement is a good thing, but I also think that differences between people is also good. That our otherness is kind of, if we all thought the same way, then it would be very hard for us to progress. That when we have these arguments, then that's.
Does Andrew want to come in? Has he got his hand up?
Yeah. I think this is like when I said shared experience, I don't mean that we share it by luck or by agreement. I mean that we share in a reality. And I think what maybe this is how you all have a conversation, but you're all assuming a very subjective reality experience, that we have no connection with the world, that we can't share, and it seems like there's this widespread view that everything that we experience is just in our heads, like we're living in the Matrix. I don't know if that's everyone's worldview, but what I mean by shared experience is that we can agree on certain facts about the world, that we're not tied just to two in our brains, not the whole brain in a vat thing. I don't know where everyone else is coming from, but I don't take the position that we cannot know things for sure in the world.
So does it go against you saying that we cannot know things for sure in the world, and positing as saying we can actually know things for sure in the world? Does it go against your perspective now that you came back, Piero? You're a relativist. Can we can we ever know any things for certain, for sure? As in, if we want, in terms of geopolitics, is there a model that we can all relate to that is the model that has got has acquired a degree of certainty that to which we all can relate to and use it as an engine or motor to progress as a society in terms of geopolitics and all of that? Or is your relativistic conception of the world or view of the world, is that an impediment to this or not?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm coming. Okay, I'll dive back in, though. I don't know what you guys were talking about, but since you pointed the question to me, I mean, I think, no, we can't know things for certain, but the question is, so compared to that, have we lost all ability to even have a goal point? Like, nothing can be perfectly smooth, but you could still polish something and make it more smooth. So the question kind of became if we're never ever going to have absolute knowledge about something, we're not going to absolutely agree. Well, is there at least some information that it's the same information that we're all digging into, and there's the potential? And yeah, now I'm at the point that even as a relativist, I think, yes, I think the current idea of physics and information theory merging means that, yes, there's real information there. Now, it's an infinite sum of all the possible information that could possibly have produced the current object you're looking at, the current state of affairs you're looking at. So you're never going to get that infinite understanding. But theoretically, suddenly we know what we're going for. Okay, well, it's infinite. We're not going to do infinite. Let's take the major components and go through them. And if we go through a couple hundred, we're going to get down to details that are important in some level, but we know they're less significant than the things we've already found out, and suddenly we actually can start to have this knowledge of where, yeah, we can compel each other to certain conclusions when it comes to geopolitics. And again, this is an exploratory thing. I don't know where it can go, but where I'm hoping it works out is that there's something in what we were talking about last week with the symbiotic. You know, what is a symbiotic relationship in nature? What is a predatory, one? What is a parasitic relationship? I think we can actually answer those questions. And of course, you might have people that say, yeah, and I decide to be a parasite. Fine, but it still it opens up a way for us to discuss that it is parasitic, and somebody could choose to be parasitic, but we would still be on the same page as to what that means. And there could be commonality, because many of us will go, well, yeah, of those three options, I'd like to be symbiotic. And we could find actual material, real agreements on the meaning of life from the framework of, yeah, we're trying to figure out how to fit together. Do we really, okay, race divides us. To me, race dividing us, totally an illusion. Race does not really divide us. It only really divides us because we make this illusion real. It's actually an illusion. Whereas scarce resources, that actually can divide you. That is a material physically. That's not just us. That's not an illusion we've made real of division. If there's a real resource conflict, if there really was only enough food for 1 billion people on this planet, we really would have to fight over the food. But that's not the case. There's more than enough for 7 billion. So, that's a material fact that, yes, we can agree on those material facts because there's information in nature.
It seems like if you are going to take a subjectivist position or a relativist position, what is the bounds or the anchor for you to make conclusions like, well, there's only so much food that we can grow in the world and things like that? It seems to me to make you
Well,
wide
you could
open.
say it's my opinion that we can only grow so much food on the planet, right? Like it's through my
But
subjective
that's not going
viewpoint,
to
I think
matter.
this.
That's not going to matter unless it is the case. Like we were talking about earlier, at the very beginning of this, we were talking about understanding, and it seemed to me like what we meant by understanding was that it does conform to the world. It is a true fact or something like that. So the opinions don't matter. It's really the understandings, and it seems to me the understandings is it's what helps us make progress or make decisions on questions like resources and things like that, or how we should interact. Should we have property rights and things like that?
Like you know, we can assume that there's a world, and we can assume things about, once we make that assumption, then we can build from there and assume that there are crops and there are resources and there's only so many of them. I mean, I can't prove that I'm not a brain in a vat, but I could, given the idea that in the matrix that I'm in, that I think I'm in, that there's only so many resources in that, perceived reality. And people can disagree with me.
Well, this is a circle we're in. I think we've been for thousands of years, and I'm in the relativist side of this, so of breaking down that we could get the one answer. But what I'm saying is I also, in that whole process, I've become a materialist, and if information exists in the real world, then yeah, it has to do with the relationship, and information is energy, and so we can figure out how much of food you can grow. There's still relativism in there, because what's food? Well, okay, we're talking about humans, food for humans. So there's still relativism in there, but we can calculate, how much wheat could we grow on this planet, given the sunlight, and how much nutrients are in the soil. Those are all materially estimable things that we don't have to know exactly correctly to still say, well, to the first order, we know there's this much soil on the planet. We know there's this much territory. We know there's this much sunlight that hits the surface. So, we have to agree on the meaning of the information if we had full information. If we know all of those parameters, many of which scientifically as a species we do know, then yes, there are compelling conclusions that somebody that makes those calculations could say, look, this is how much wheat you could grow, plus or minus this many million tons, and we should all share that opinion. I mean, that is absolutely turns out to be possible with the experiences that we're given, even with relativism.
See, I would disagree with that, because the first economist to do that was this guy named Thomas Malthus, and he was back in the 1780s during the French Revolution, and he looked at the land mass of the world and how much wheat at that time we could produce per acre, and he calculated that we would the human population growth would have to cap off in about 1830, that we were, population was growing exponentially, and we were going to use up all the resources of the world by 1830. Now, what he was missing in his calculation was technology, is that we can
because that was true relative to the technology of the day.
Right. Economists often say when they say something, they're right, but then as soon as they say it, then they end up wrong. It's kind of funny. Like, it makes sense given the time period they're in.
What about energy? Let's use energy. We could calculate the total energy available on the planet, right? I mean, just even if it's totally theoretically, just let's say we EMC squared every bit of mass on this planet. That's the maximum energy you could get out of this planet by consuming it. Right. It wouldn't be a very useful number because we could never actually use all that. That's so theoretical. But I mean, it does show that we can put boundaries, right? We're not saying we could calculate the exact number, but we can put boundaries. One of the implicit boundaries on the Malthus calculation would be that, you know, given this way of raising, you know, raising plants or whatever. Now, the thing is, are there really infinite ways to raise plants? I mean, sure, maybe there's another way to grow things that are more maximal, but you can break it down to the physics. At some point, the plant needs a certain amount of energy. It needs to get it from somewhere, if it's going to get it from the sun or from nuclear power. So, I mean, we can put these boundaries on.
You're talking about principle, and I think you're right. And Inventive is speaking to the pragmatic historical problems we've encountered. I think scientifically what we mean to say is within some agreed accuracy, we can always calculate whatever we want to calculate, theoretically. Yeah, you know, back then, yeah, they made mistakes, but that doesn't speak to the principled question of that it's calculable. You know, given, like, if we say there is so much surface area, there are so much, you know, in the entire Earth's core and everything, so much weight of minerals, and that wheat requires this amount of mineral, and it goes through some sort of biological cycle, blah blah blah, with this rate of depositing here, and within constraints, we can calculate how much wheat we can generate. You know, and that's all he's saying. Inventive. In principle, he's not saying that. Yes, we're not talking about the political decision to say, right, because we can do it, we will now go do it. That's a pragmatic problem.
What I'm saying is that you know, technology, the definition of is getting more output per input. That we're better at producing than we were before, so we can get more output for each input of energy than we did in the past. And I don't know if there's a limit to that, because there's human imagination.
What we're talking about is efficiency. Back then we was like 10% efficient, and now with mechanization we're 50% efficient. So we can assume some theoretical, you know, improvement in efficiency. We've achieved efficiency and productivity gains by genetic engineering as well on crops. So we can sprinkle those ingredients in within compound and say, because it's been on some rate, hasn't it? I think it's a straight line graph of improvements, you know, that we've made in
we're about to have a bunch. I mean, I'm actually working right now in these improvements that I think are going to really help. This precision agriculture world is going to really help outputs. So I think we're going to have another, it looks to me technologically, another big boom in you know, our per capita ability to do this. But well, let's take it back to another thing though, which is what about, you know, the geopolitics of human rights? You know, I mean, is there going to be a way for us to agree that on what human rights are supposed to be? You know, a person has a right not to be, you know, murdered by a citizen or the state or anything. Yet we put exceptions to that all the time, you know, and we change. It's like, yeah, you can't, you know, the state can't murder anybody. We call that, you know, execution, you know, so we just changed the word. So is there really any way to agree, you know, or the gay marriage, which has been so controversial over here, you know, is there a way to say, you know, and I really think that's where it breaks down, and I go back to my traditional relativism. I think at that level it's so hard to really find or prove a compelling thing that even if it's possible, we're reduced to, look, everybody get in a group, think about how you want to be treated, and then realize you got to give everybody else the same treatment. That's how we find out, okay, I want to be able to allow to marry who I want, so okay, you can do that too. Oh, okay, I don't want to be killed on the street because I bumped into you, and that's considered, you know, you're allowed to shoot me then, so I won't shoot you either when you bump. I mean, I think that's basically, most of our actual human rights within our society and how we treat other countries is just going to come down to an agreement. Like, oh, I don't want to be treated that way. And as far as the people that are like, no, I want to have war. I want to declare war on you, and I want you to declare war on me. It's just, hopefully that's not the majority. I think right now we're living in a world where it looks like that might be the majority, and people would decide, instead of the human rights things, let's just kill each other until one of us is left standing. I don't think there's a way to prove to those people in a practical sense. But I think it might theoretically be possible because we're all the same species. We're already in this huge cooperation that is this genetic propagation system. So, yeah, I think if you track all the logic, you'll find out, no, it doesn't make sense as a human being to just enslave, thousands of other people for that's not how genetic propagation usually works. One family should only care about itself. That's just not really how social animals usually work. There's nothing really to make us think it has to be that way. And if we ask most people, they don't want it to be that way. Now, could you prove it shouldn't be that way? I think to a certain degree, there's a logical argument based on our relationships, our genetic relationships, that we're all actually one big organism.
Well, I think it's easily provable.
Oh, really? We'll go into it, because I always do find I'm too much of a relativist, and I do struggle at that, where I'll go into the street and do political activism for these human rights, and philosophically I think it's hard to do anything other than say I know it when I see it. I know a human violation, rights violation, when I see it, and that's about as far as it goes often.
I think you touched on it. You touched on part of the insight, and I think I have a consistent proof, which can be agreed with as a proof of such. But you have to accept a couple of definitions of what I understand to be, a moral principle and so forth. Yeah, I don't think they're particularly disagreeable definitions, but we do have to be careful and be sure we agree on them at the beginning, because I don't want the flexibility. Without agreeing them, you find people's minds twist and wrinkle from what they want to agree to. I did a Hangout once. We didn't broadcast it, but I had a good chat with Sizo, yeah? And I said, right, he was a bit of a relativist, morally speaking. And I said, let me play this game with you of yes/no answers, yeah? Were you... And I'd wanted to try this with somebody like you, or Rizzle Dizzle or something, this yes/no game. But the proof, I'll not do that now, but I'll just state it as best I can, and as quickly as I can. Right.
Well, take your time.
You have to agree that the long-term decisions are best undertaken by the use of reason, not gut feeling, not how you feel, but reason. And it has to be, and in that one singular statement, you confine yourself to the use of logic and mathematics and consistency and a lot of concepts. So the first thing, I think the first was, yeah?
I just want to say, yeah, that's great. And I love that kind of principle, because a lot of people don't do that, but almost everyone will agree to it. It's just like thieves. People will steal, but very few thieves argue for the moral righteousness of stealing. They just do it anyway and say, yeah, I know it was wrong. So I think that's right, because that is the kind of principle people will accept, even if they don't actually live by it, because it's their goal to live by it. Maybe, I would accept that, and sometimes I don't live by it. So I just wanted to interject, because, so I think that's an acceptable one. I think we could put that up there, and people... 99% of them will accept it, whether they're capable of it or not.
People would be pushed, any reasoned person would be pushed to reject it. So the second thing I have to get on the table quite early is there might be many rules of morality, and you can arrive at them however you like. But if I can give you a rule which influences your behavior that stems from your commitment to reason, will you, you know, that when you're deciding how to act, because morality doesn't exist singular, yeah? If you exist in the universe on your own, it doesn't exist. You can do exactly as you wish, right?
Yeah.
So it's relational. So if you, and it's about how my activities impinge on you, and how your activities impinge on me, and how we deal with that problem, right? So if I can give you any rule that stems from reason, that changes your long-term behavior because it comes from reason, blah blah blah. Would you accept that I've given you a moral principle? Does that have I
Yeah,
explained
no,
that?
absolutely. Well,
So,
yeah, you probably put it more succinctly, but I would agree with that.
Now then, there is a mathematical arena, topic, category, a category of mathematics that deals with the interactions.
Right.
Inventive will know where I'm going now, because I think he's heard argument along these lines. But the category of mathematics that deals with this practicalities of interaction is called game theory. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you decide to reason about it, one of the assumptions you make is that the other guy knows that 2 chickens is better than 1 chickens. Yeah. If we were play some kind of game, simplistic game.
Yeah, I got nowhere to put all my extra chickens.
Yeah, but you assume that he's got that amount of rationality, and from that equality, from that, I assume that you want to live, not be murdered, want to praise your own God, blah blah blah. From that game theoretic understanding of the equivalence of an equality you have at a deep level of reasoning in trying to negotiate any interaction, you get a rule that says, I must grant you that rationality, that you know 2 is bigger than 1. From there, the pragmatics extrapolate, in my mind, I can't articulate it clearly, but from me, from that one insight, the pragmatics of setting up a social structure based from that one insight means that it means that we have a legal system that, as far as possible, reflects that reality of gameplay, that we are equal before the law, that we have equality to life. It can't be there judging every move we make. I might steal a butty from you when you turn your... And we can never practically have such a society, but we understand from that one insight that I wouldn't want to. And then that's it, really. And it's a long way of saying what you just said is, I don't want to be murdered, you don't want to be murdered. What we're doing.
And that we can get there from reason, and I agree with that. I think my relativism we differ maybe in that I think you start finding contradictions that are too reasonable. Like, you can have an unreasonable argument, throw it away, but there's other reasonable arguments, you'll end up with contradictory conclusions, and I would say this is sort of the multiverse of the multi-logic verse, you know, where that's just the case. Part of what you have to realize is that there are some of these contradictions that can be both have reasonable explanations, but that's not a bad thing. That's in your law where you're going to give human rights. You know, if it's just as logical, it's illogical not to want to eat at all and say that you want to go on living, but it's logical to say I prefer Italian food or Thai food, and so obviously we're not going to make a law of those. So we will look at these contradictions and allow the contradictions to exist, and I don't think we're going to have a contradiction on whether or not people want others to be able to kill them at whim. That's not going to be a problem. We're not going to have a contradiction at that level.
Let me ask the blunt question. Was my argument that there is a root output, a moral principle of a basic equality whenever we try to negotiate? Was it compelling that there's a moral principle in that? I ask Andrew, and you know, inventive? Do you find that compelling, that there's a logical... Andrew, what do you think? Was that compelling? Was you listening? Was it overly verbose, or...
The way I think about it, like, are you talking about we should be consistent? Is that the one you're talking about?
I'm asking, did I make a compelling argument? Did you understand the argument that in the end I said we all believe in reason, and if you do, you're going to get an imposed rule on your behaviour as how you interact with people. That was the thrust of it, I guess.
If we all reason, though, why would we need the laws and rules? It seems to me the laws and rules are in place for people who do not use reason.
Well, that's a different question. That's a practical question. That's, isn't it?
Well, I can throw the wrench in. The traditional wrench is one guy reasons that, well, it's better for me. He could reason that it's better for society if he didn't, you know, burn down the house and loot it. But he could reason for himself that it was a benefit. And I think that where Hythelite is going, and where I want to be able to go, is that, look, if we have kind of a requirement of full knowledge, so that we could start at a higher level principle, there is no reasonable way to say that as a group, right? Because he started off with this being about the relationships, or I would say morality is how you treat others in a group. If you're allowed to start with that, there's no reasonable way for that guy to say, I should be able to steal. You know, he could personally decide that by taking himself out of the group and say, I'm going to be a parasite on that group. But if you say you're in this group, you know, you're born into it, and you're rational, then yeah, you can prove stealing is wrong. That's the theory.
Just because the group thinks so, so the group is the standard? Because what if that group wants to cut you up for your organs too?
Yeah. Or for my example is, what if it's the Nazis? I mean, I'm going to lie to the Nazis. I think it's immoral not to lie to the Nazis.
The complex situations. The point is that if the person being greedy is built into the mathematics of the game theory. I want 2 chickens and only give you 1 chicken. Yeah, but I also understand if we map that out in a matrix, there's just no way you're gonna go, oh yeah, right, fine, yeah. So you start off with the simple situations for the insight. The practical problems of, oh, there's a group of people, they all want to murder us. That's just something completely else different. That's a different. First of all, we get a principle on the table, and then we ask ourselves, if you want to, you know, have a justice system and a larger community, you also get the insight that you have to give up personally solving everything, and that you have to have a government, and but those principles of insights will be reflected in the human rights. Yeah, it says, what I'm saying says nothing about the personal wants, and people in game theory always try to cheat. And systems can have a certain stable percentage of cheaters, you know.
Okay, so I want to answer too. But it's funny thing about the game theory people always cheat. That's been the assumption, but I think some of the game theory examples have showed that actually no, you have to be an enlightened player to win the game. But anyway, Andrew, I was going to put it this way. So I do not believe. I believe in a little bit of this thing that looks like the supremacy of the consensus as being the moral thing, but not really. I think it's built up this way. I think we can individually, using reason and some principles, ideas about what groups do I belong to. So where is the moral question? Who am I asking? How do I treat these people morally? So I'm in that group, and we individually decide what's moral. Then we all go in into a big conference center, and we're just talking. Here's what I thought's moral. What do you think, Inventive Harvest? And we're going to find that our pages match a lot about major things. Right? And so it's more like, no, I think you can deduce this individually what's right, But then when push comes to shove, and are you going to be able to stop people from stealing that want to steal anyway? It's going to be a numbers game, and then you're into sociology and politics, and do the Nazis outnumber the non-Nazis or not? But you're not going to the group and saying, hey, group, you will tell me, the individual, what's moral. No, I, the individual, am rationally figuring out what's moral, and then I try to see if other rational individuals have come to similar conclusions, sufficient for us to cooperate and create a society together, or a police force to act on our moral convictions. So I would say that I think that gets me at least out of the looking to what is moral definitely can't be what the society says, right? We've seen too many immoral societies, our society, all of them, so that can't drive what really is moral. It's just that the question of morality is a group question, so an individual can decide what's moral, but then they're going to have to go back to that group, and they're going to have to see what the other
Is Piro gone?
us that debate this.
There
We agree on so many of the details.
You're back. You froze. You went out of it then, Pero, for about 10 seconds.
Well, did I just make the... Yeah, I think I already made the point, though, that I'm saying that I think you can rationally decide this as an individual, but since the question of morality is how do you treat others in a group, eventually you have to come back to this group, and you're going to find out what the consensus is.
Yeah, you're summing over all possible groups, aren't you?
Yeah, no, I'm trying to use that technique. I really, because I think that that's a good technique because, yeah, you'll never get every last detail, but human mind, we can start on the big terms, and work our way down to the little terms. And at a certain point, it's like, I got enough accuracy already. I know murder's illegal, And when you get down to some questions, maybe it'll always be difficult. Like, I think a fundamentally difficult question is how much autonomy from their parents should children have? That's the problem. There is no absolute answer to it.
Big problem.
I think
there's some parents where
there's like there's a sociologist named Poole, and he was saying that the fundamental unit for sociology is a group of between 3 and 12. Like if you get more than 12, then you lose the interpersonal connections, and it just becomes kind of a amorphous thing. Where that and the bottom of 3 is where it becomes interesting because 2 people can gang up to exclude the third person. And I think that a lot of this is learned. I was watching a YouTube video that was a 60 Minutes clip about a scientific study about baby morality, and what they did in the study was have babies watch various puppet shows, and then they could pick which puppet they liked better. And in a lot of the ways, and these are babies that are just learning how to move their arms and stuff. They're not overly sophisticated. Or some of them can't move their arms. They just kind of measure which puppet does the baby look at more, because babies tend to look at things they like. And some of the things that the babies did were very cool, like if a puppet shares its toy with another puppet, and then the other puppet steals the toy, the babies are more likely to like the puppet that shares the toy. However, sometimes the babies are not very cool, right? So if they've got, they give the baby a choice. Do you want Cheerios or do you want Chex Mix? And the baby chooses the Cheerios, the Chex Mix, and then they've got 2 puppets, and one puppet will choose Cheerios and one puppet will choose Chex Mix, and the babies have will choose the puppet they identify with, and they will exclude the other puppet just because it made some very small choice to make it an other. And so I think that's something that we have to learn.
I want to search on this. Could you give me a clue? Who was doing this research? This is a great experiment. I love these.
If you type in baby morality or infant morality into YouTube, it'll come right up to 60 Minutes. It's from CBS is the name of the channel.
Interesting, yeah. That's a clever idea, actually, to show to have a puppet show, and then watch the baby's interaction. Yeah. So, and eye tracking's pretty cool. I saw some stuff recently where now they can eye track on dogs and stuff. So we're getting some kind of insight on some familiar personalities we live with here. You can eye track and see what the dog thinks and stuff. But interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So some of the things we learn throughout life and become better at accepting the others, and then some of morality is purely instinctual. It's something that we're born with. If there's some moral genes or something.
Well, I was always a blank slate person, but it obviously isn't a blank slate. I grew up being a blank slate just because reacting to this whole it's all your genes, screw that's racism, but it turns out it's definitely not a blank slate. We got even morality built in.
If my proposition, or even Pyro to an extent, if it's true that there is a logical grounding for morality, then and for cooperative living in nature, then it's evolution's job to build that into us intuitively without the reason. Yeah. And I like the what's his name, Robert Sapolsky, on the evolutionary biology series he does, and he talks about monkeys that have been friends or something are more likely to cooperate, pulling bananas. Oh, that's it. They can only get the bananas if they pull together. Yeah, and so they learn to do this to get mutual benefit. And there's more cooperation done if then what happens is if they just give the bananas to one monkey, far more likely will the monkey sort of throw the food to the other monkey if they've had this cooperative history, But,
well, I think the way I think, or what my hope is I think that since if we're talking about morality as a question of how to treat people in a group, so we'll talk about mostly what we're talking about with human morality, how to treat other humans. I think that you could make an argument based on that we are in that group, and somebody that was denying this basic morality of human rights, not a bunch of which animals, whether you can eat dogs or not, but I mean just basic human rights of how to treat other humans, that to deny this system, this somewhat minimalist moral system, they would have to be saying, well, I'm not a part of the human race. And they could exit the human race in some sense, and I could still say, well, what do you mean? I could see your genes and who you were born with and where you grew up. You are a part of the human race. You're just denying it. They could say, yeah, well, but no more. And we couldn't rectify that difference between us. But in order for them to reject the basic human rights of I shouldn't kill others and steal from you and I shouldn't enslave your children and things like that, they would actually have to deny being a part of this group, the human race. And if they are part of that group, though, then that will entail these logical, it can't tell you whether you should be polyamorous or not. It's going to fail a lot of moral things that Christians have wanted to call moral. But in terms of the important things of you can't invade someone's house and kill their dog, and those things will come out of it.
I think there's something wrong with what you said there, because I sometimes imagine what would happen if a spaceship arrived and it said, look, they weren't very technologically advanced. They've just basically had to, at the last ditch, get off the planet they was on. They arrive with a fleet of, I don't know, let's say 1 billion of them, yeah, arrive in a huge floating fleet. Others may be lost. They had population of 15 billion, and they just set up, and they just happenstance stumble upon us, and they say, the reserves and everything, and they need us to, to allow them to subsist on this planet. What we going to do? Are we going to grant them human rights? I think that's an interesting question, as this whole you're not in humanity. I think a certain amount of
Well, if we saw ourselves as in a group of sentient creatures with them, we would find the commonality. Suddenly, the moral issues would come into play. If we said, no, they're just other, they're not us, then we wouldn't answer that question with a morality, because the morality, I believe, is how you treat people that are part of a group you think you're a part of. On the other hand, I think we're pretty modern, and we'd go, you know what, sentient life meets sentient life. We are part of a fraternity, sorority of, we're not just rocks, and I think we would have to have that.
I don't think the human population on Earth, in majority, would be particularly, we're all one big universe. I think they would be a hell of a lot of people saying,
well, I agree with you. I was just saying,
carry on going.
Yeah. Well, there is this modern sentiment, but I agree with you overall. If it like happened today, for sure, yeah.
People would be sectarian.
So,
I think Miguel had his hand up.
Go ahead. Oh, you're muted. You've got yourself muted, Miguel. There we go.
1, 2, 3. Yeah, go ahead. Yes, I think it goes down a bit to what the various legal systems around the world have as definitions of person, isn't it? Of person, of what consists of what is property, what am I allowed to have, or what is it rightful mine to own, and in a larger sense, what is the definition? What is a person? What defines a person? More than just the basic needs of what is a person? What is a person? If those aliens came, are you a person?
Well, how do you think people, just guessing with your fellow humans, I mean, what do you think people would say? Like in a District 9 situation, if you saw that movie or something, I mean, what would we, which is really interesting, because that's all about the human rights, but those guys were coming here to fuck us up. So, it's a weird, it's a movie has an extra subtext besides the District 9 camp. But what do you think? I would like to say that we would grant human rights to alien refugees. Do you think, Miguel? Well, I was asking Miguel. What do you think? First, let me ask Miguel. What do you think, Miguel? What would the human race? Would we stand up?
I think we would grant them rights in terms of being as human, as equal to it. But then it goes to the definition of what is a person. What is a person? We need to go to the legality of the term. If you go through the judicial codes throughout the world, then you'll find that although there are similarities in the definition of what a person is, in terms of what kind of person can do certain can negotiate, can buy, can sell, all of those things need to be taken in consideration. But I think that the basic attributes of a person would be given to those beings, but it needs to be, something has to be said about their ability to trade, to engage, to all of those things. I think it would be a very tricky situation.
Can I just say that it is a human right to have a nation state, to have a home as a nation, so you can't really, if you adapt, you can't really say we reject you as an American citizen in the human rights business. So if we accepted them as persons entitled to rights, we would have to then agree amongst themselves the distribution of those persons amongst the nation states, because as persons they would have the political rights as to have, to live somewhere and call it their nation.
Can you define human rights? So are we talking about negative rights like not to be killed or free speech and things like that, or do we mean positive rights like free healthcare and free food and free property?
Talking about the Declaration of Human Rights, the UN Declaration of Human Rights. It's
Yeah, I usually mean the negative
multiple
rights.
documents. It's actually a composite of multiple documents and ideas and conventions. I have a little summary book, but
Right.
I'm pretty sure, you know, it starts off with right to life, right to freedom of religion, freedom of sexual preference.
Well, I like the way Andrews breaks it down. I mean, because usually I mean the negative rights when I say human rights. And then for the other things, I believe that's something we do together as a society when we decide what's the best way to spend our money on our common infrastructure. And if we haven't invented phones, phones aren't a part of it. And once we've invented phones, it's like, yeah, you know what, Lifeline, everybody needs a phone. They might need to call 911. And so that's the level at which we guarantee health care and education, and which I do support all those things. But philosophically, it's not the human rights are like, no, you know what, even if it costs a lot of money, you can't go killing people. You know, it's not just a practical, well, how do you make your infrastructure? You know, do you kill every 10th child because it's infrastructurally it keeps population down? No, that would be a violation of human rights. So that's usually how I mean it.
Yeah? Those are positive rights.
Well, I'm saying, yeah, when I say human rights, I'm usually talking the right not to be abridged in basic freedoms, and they would be considered these protections against negative infringements, right, is usually what I mean with human rights. And you know, the right to free passage, to be unhindered in passing from one place to another, is the closest it gets to a positive right. You know, in my own personal use of the term, I'm just saying, because he was asking how do we use it.
What's your distinction between positive and negative rights, Andrew?
What is my distinction?
Uh-huh.
Are you asking me what my distinction is?
Yeah, or the definition you were using.
Well, just so we're on the same page here.
Negative right is like not being killed, right? Stopping other people from acting on you.
Yeah. Yeah, I define negative rights as preventing people from doing things to you, and then positive rights meaning entitlements to you. So positive right, like healthcare, would mean that you're entitled to someone giving you healthcare or giving you education or giving you food, things like that. That's a positive right or a claim.
Like entitled to be to a fair hearing is one of the rights. You know, to be equality under the law and to a trial by jury. You know, and not to be.
But something like that could be put either way, though. See, I would see that as a negative right because it's not even an infringement.
Yes.
And, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's habeas corpus, the right not to be imprisoned for no reason. So, yeah. So it can be phrased the other way.
And then, but it is clear though when we start to get to things we also might call entitlements. And I guess it is an important issue because I notice a lot of very conservative and libertarian angle. The part of the reaction against human rights activism is this idea that we're including things like everybody should be able to have a 2-car garage and a house, and you know what I mean. And that's, see, I support those kind of programs, but I wouldn't call them rights. I don't support them as rights. I mean, they're obviously something you do because you can afford to and it's smart. Whereas you don't kill another person for no reason, you know, not in self-defense or any, you know, period. You know.
Are we? Am I right in sensing that you oppose positive rights, Andrew?
A good question.
For the most part, yes, because they're actually an imposition on another person to provide. Like that's one of the also distinctions between negative and positive. Negative rights does not require anyone to do anything, just not do something. But a positive right requires someone else to provide it, whether that's education or healthcare or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I've just got my human rights book, and I was wondering which ones might be objectionable in your manner, in your general rights.
What is your book? Your book?
He wrote a book.
Human rights?
No.
I wanted to ask, though, somewhat jokingly, but if we had this 1 billion aliens coming to the Earth, would Puro be okay with 2 of them shacking up in his house?
If they're the cool ones, you know. Gonna watch some movies, hang on. Yeah. Well, see, while you're
I
looking
kind of
that
think
up, I just
that
go ahead.
I have the rights that I can assert for myself in some ways, and that might be through a government, right? But if I can kill someone and no one's going to stop me from killing them, then I have the right to murder.
Interesting.
If I can stop people from killing me, then I have the right to life. Now what we could do is we could set up a government that would impose, help me assert these, right? Like that would assert them for everyone. Um, and so it's just about what can a man do, and um, and sometimes we can have rights that are a little questionable, as Andrew points out.
But you're putting a third thing entirely, because we like the way Andrew was discussing it. There's this principle of the matter, and you're putting it all down to if there's a speeding law but nobody enforces it, there's not really a speeding law. So you're saying that everything that is a right would have to be a positive right, because it's not enough just to say you have a right to not be murdered in the street, but somebody needs to help prevent that murder, or else it's not really a right, which really complicates it. It sort of makes everything into a positive right. It's a guarantee of outcome, which I'm actually inclined to try to do. I don't think it's good enough just to say you have the right to not be murdered and then our cities are full of murder. That's not actually, there's something wrong about that.
Yeah, well, when we talk about rights, it's not a metaphysical thing like the other person that was just speaking, saying that you have I can't remember what the example was, but it was right to murder. If no one's going to stop me, I can murder someone. But that we're not talking about what you can do in the world. You can behave any way you like. When we talk about rights, we're talking about an agreement in society or what our government is supposed to enforce. It doesn't bind you necessarily. There are certain consequences to behaviors. That's another topic. But when we talk about rights, it's supposed to be an agreement that a government enforces.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a metaphysical. It doesn't change the world. It's just our context of living, let's say.
Well, but then Inventive was pointing out that if the government is really bad at securing that right, then you don't really have it, which to me means the government has to spend money and effort, which makes every single right a positive right by the definitions we were using, right, which I like your definition, right, because suddenly other people have to pay to have the police force to make sure you don't get murdered in Detroit, or else you don't really have that right of liberty, and so yeah, it's a mess.
Well, there are solutions. Like I think some of the libertarian solution is that I guess Ayn Rand's solution was that it should be voluntary taxation to provide the government. Whether that is sustainable or not because of free riders, I have no idea. But you're right. There is that. It bothers a lot of the libertarians. What that taxation is theft. You hear that all the time. So you want to have a state. If you want to have a state that has certain basic rights, they have to be funded to enforce them. How is that funding acquired? Is that an imposition now already? So there's definitely that problem.
So hey, we're getting up close to when I'm going to have to go. So I had a question. I don't know. Maybe it won't strike anybody. We'll have an answer. But I was kind of curious. As a wrap-up thing on this is, I'm curious. I believe it's important. Metaphors are important, and so I'm curious if anybody might want to answer on a metaphorical view of what is society. I mean, society is itself, but it's hard to get a handle on what is it like. So, I think traditionally, a nation at least is usually it's a metaphor to the family is the way it seems that historically we've done it. Now, I prefer looking at society not as a family, but as an organism, and CDC is the liver or whatever. I know the FDA is the liver, whatever, and it's organistic. And maybe there's another metaphor. So I was curious, even if it's just an offhand joke, what is society? It's a cesspool, but do you think it's more like a family or an organism, or is there some other kind of a network? Maybe there's another metaphor, or maybe it's just those two. I mean, those seem to be the two. Hegelian is the. Oh, a third one is that it's a machine of some sort. It's more like a clockwork. It's less living than an organism. So I don't know if anybody. I would love to hear.
I can't give you a metaphor, Pyro. I'll just say as bluntly as I can what it is. I don't believe in using a metaphor where you can say what it is.
Right.
And I can't think of a metaphor to metaphor what I'm going to say.
Okay.
But I believe society is just the giving up of personal freedoms to act cooperatively, such that you work in a legal framework of where you give up the freedom to be the judge, jury, and executioner. Yeah. That's
so, but that sounds like a social contract kind of thing. But what about the fact that we're all born into it and we never actually get to make that agreement? We just, by the time we make the agreement, we're agreed already.
It sounds like you're saying society's imposed on us.
No,
well,
I'm
saying he was saying society is an agreement. I'm saying we never made the agreement.
That's what society is. Yeah.
Society is an agreement.
Some people might not want to be in it.
But so what metaphor, then the answer is you're saying society is a kind of an agreement. Or yes or no? Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to paraphrase.
Yeah, I guess that would be the closest metaphor. Yeah. Is,
which I like that. There's a lot of tradition, I think, to that, too. The problem is just how we actually make the agreement or not. I mean,
it's not technically true. Because
it could be if we just open borders and people could choose easier.
Argument, I know that, yeah.
Well, I don't think it's your fault. I think if we had open borders, people should be able to emigrate, and you could choose where to live, and then, yeah, it'd be an agreement, and there'd be a market for available agreements that was not infinite, but whatever. So, yeah. So that's a good actual extra thing.
I think you might need to make a distinction. Like, I don't know what the purpose of this, of you asking this is for, but you might need to make a distinction between, like, the society in terms of a free market, in terms of our aggregate decisions, all the sum of our decisions, versus what a city council does, because those to me are different things. You got like all the individuals in society that do things, that buy things and drive places and whatever, and then you've got a few who make big decisions that affect everyone. So it's hard to put those together into a metaphor, because society really is both of those. It's the lawmakers and it's individual people doing things, right?
Well, and so even if I'm right in that you can apply a metaphor to a system, overall, society is so many different systems that it's actually, a system of systems, and it wouldn't necessarily, it's got families, and it's got organizations, and it's got machines in it, and yeah, maybe it's inherently too complex to try to cast a metaphor. Though I would come back with an organism, with all the complex organs that an organism can have, you can always work your way, reverse engineer out. But that's a good point, yeah, that it really is inherently complex, and that, the legal system might be one kind of a thing that, described one way, and obviously, our sports culture or our holidays, these are all going to not fall in a light category. So that's a good point, yeah.
It's almost as if like society lives and moves through time, and people do little things. Like if I buy something at a store, that's a very small change. But if a city council imposes a new parking law, kind of like it injects a whole new, small or big change depending on what it is, that affects everyone slowly over time until then it's normal again, and then we all buzz along as usual. But there are
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Go ahead.
Well, I did, but I didn't mean to. I'm trying to cast what you're saying into a single word answer, and you're kind of saying that society is an economic network, like not necessarily closed, but with borders, permeable borders possible, but that it's you're kind of describing it like an economic network.
Well, yeah, it's almost like society could be a collective decision making and collective interests, maybe. There's a whole bunch of people have very different interests, or not very different, but People have different interests, and they pursue those interests, and all those people also are making decisions. So
Yeah,
the
economy
aggregate
might not even be the right word, really, but I can't think of a better one now. But yeah, it's an economic network, but not just economic, but like the economy of everything, of emotional and what you want, and your aesthetics, and not just money economy necessarily. But yeah, so those are interesting, both of those, agreement and an economic network. But I think there's a better term to
I
describe what
think
you're
you're
trying
saying
to say.
collective of decisions. Like it's the aggregate
Yeah. Oh, a
of all the
decision
decisions.
network. A decision network. This is interesting.
yeah, decision making. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
and
really
like I was
interesting.
saying about society, or I mean the lawmakers doing things, injecting changes, again, that kind of alters how decisions are made. But then it
Huh.
maybe would dissipate, and then there'd be some kind of normalcy again, and then things would go along as normal. And then another injection would come in.
Yeah,
That's
I
a
would
really
definitely.
powerful way to look at it, actually, because then everything is on the same basis, right? Political policy, whether you have road rage or bottle it up so that you know, how you interact, everybody, it is part of this decision. It can be visualized as a decision, yeah, um,
I think I definitely reject
powerful.
the idea it's a machine because it changes over time.
Huh.
There used to not be rights for African Americans, and now there are. It's the society changes. I think that some of those decisions that Andrew was talking about is the social contract that Hythloday is talking about, because you could technically decide to leave, although that's going to be a hard decision to make.
Hmm.
Um, you could go form a John Galt society if you didn't like the city council or whatnot. So you kind of decide to be ruled by the city council. Um, I was going somewhere with that. I don't remember.
I
Well, I
think
Um,
with
think
the
the issue with the
machine,
machine stuff is interesting because there's two things. One, a machine is sort of this automated, doesn't really think, but there's another kind of aspect to it being a machine, which is maybe it has its own interests, is somehow self-interest and what individuals want, what's best for the biggest group, and all of that stuff is just not really. Somehow it's on its own little course. You know what I mean? People have theories that a power structure just starts becoming self-interest, and even though people go in and work for this company, it really, a big corporation starts to have its own kind of interests, just chews up even its own employees. It's not really represented as the sum of the total in a sense. Somehow as a whole, it's a machine. It's got its own interests. You know what I mean? And I think both of those are questionable, but the second one, just the part of it kind of running off on its own and not being the benefit of its parts, I don't know. I think that's a poetic thing we don't need. And as far as it being, yeah, just a cold machine somehow, well, I don't believe that because I'm a big proponent of willpower and free will, and I think they obviously play out in, society. So,
I think you're saying
from
we don't get to choose what society we're born into, and we also don't get to choose when society changes, right? So we could have some person that lived before the civil rights movement and was happy with the social contract because they just didn't like the black people or whatnot, and then the social contract changes and black people have rights, and they're like, well, wait a minute, I didn't agree to that part of the social contract, and now it's on me. That's probably a bad example, but as society changes, that you might not have agreed to what it's changing into.
from the machine metaphor, what I don't know where that comes from, but what I think about if you say society is like a machine, is that there's some normal, usual behavior in society. So if you were to find the commonalities within ancient Rome society and any present society, there would be some usual, predictable behavior amongst the people in the society. That to me is what the machine means. That there's some normal, usual movement.
interesting.
And
Yeah,
and what that would
yeah.
be, I have no idea, but maybe
No,
it's
but it's
human
important.
psychology.
It's funny you put it that way because to me the machine metaphor sounded like the most negative one. But if you're relating it to the fact that society gives us consistency, that's, I think,
Yeah,
huge in geopolitics. Because when you go back over history and all these terrible crimes we've had, or why did Machiavelli write The Prince? Well, it's because you know, it wasn't so stable when the Spanish came in and were running, you know, Italy at the time, and he would have rather had a brutal prince and some stability. In other words, that's really what they were getting, at least from their government. And so you're right, society providing that stability, kind of right or wrong, at least you know what you're going to get. You know, yeah, reducing chaos, and psychologically that's associated with comfort. So even a nasty reality, to know what it is, it gives emotional comfort. So, well, you guys, that was great, and I'm glad we finished it that way. I don't know if you guys saw the point, but I maybe next week I'll talk more about why I like searching for metaphors. I think it's fun, but I also think it's real practical. There's some cognitive theory behind why I believe that. So, but that really worked out great. Wow, you expanded, you doubled what I had just tried to brainstorm on possible answers. So I'm going to think about that and come back. I don't know if anybody wants to make some closing remarks. You know, I have a few minutes. Feel
I just
free
want
to
to
do
add
so.
one more metaphor for society is like an escape from nature. I think I heard that in one of the Michael Sandel lectures, is that nature is that kind of chaos that you're talking about, and that through society we can escape the chaos.
Right.
He says Hume. He says he quotes Hume, doesn't he, saying nature is brutal and short. Life was
interesting. Well, I'm combining that on my list. I'm putting that as, you know, you can view it as a machine that you use to escape nature. Right. That's kind of, I mean, those two themes come together. It's like, yes, it is a machine in the sense it's a device. It would be a machine if it's a device. If it's escaping nature, then you could view it as a device by which you escape nature.
Relating, I was looking at the right.
Oh,
so
you found your reference.
The first 13 articles are pretty much negative rights, yeah, which you free marketeer, what libertarian would probably agree to. But then straight away, Article 23 goes on to say one of the things, saying equal pay for equal work. Yeah. Now your libertarian would object to that, wouldn't he? I think, and I think, whilst I understand the objection for positive rights, I think I forget what his name is. The libertarian that he studies under the Sandel course, but one of the principles that this libertarian,
John Locke, right?
No, not the libertarian guy.
Rothbard or
who?
Rothbard?
No, it is anyhow.
Hayek?
Nozick.
No, okay, yeah.
Yeah. So it just came to me. Anyway, he says one of the principles of Nozick is that in the beginning we all must have equal chance to sort of grab hold of the property and leave enough for the other people to get. Yeah. So I see these additional what you call economic and social cultural rights as a pragmatic way of
getting the other rights,
fighting the fact that the English and the Americans and the Europeans have done a land grab and a power grab, yeah. And so in principle, if everybody really got a fair shot at the resources of the world, and you know, had their little bit of oil and a big gold mine, blah blah blah, in principle, yes, there's no need for positive rights if you get the negative rights, right? But in truth, because of the evolutionary and because of the political history and the time it's taken to develop this thought, the academic thought of political philosophy, that there are these people who lost out too early in the game, and it needs redressing. And the way it's done is through establishing these rights. I'll leave it at that.
Great. Well, it was good seeing you guys, and we'll catch you all next week, right?
Yep. All right. Thanks, everybody. Yeah.
Right.
I really appreciate it. It was great. All right. Take care.